Hey, have you seen those memes with pro-gun quotations by like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson? Some of them are pretty cool, right? Well, not so fast. We have to be careful. You see, when you see a pro-gun statement by a founding father online, there is a chance that it's fake, okay? And circulating fabricated quotes hurts the gun rights cause. That's especially true because these quotes get picked up well beyond social media. And then what happens is the anti-gun crowd jumps all over these mistakes that people make and say that you're not credible and we shouldn't listen to anything you have to say because you made that mistake. Now, our founders were undeniably passionate defenders of your right to keep and bear arms. That's a fact. So there's no reason to give the anti-gun crowd reasons to discredit you by accident or otherwise if you use these wrong quotes by mistake or otherwise. You see, we started this channel, the Four Boxes Diner, in part to give you the intellectual and historical ammunition that you need to defend your fundamental Second Amendment rights. So let's take a look at some of these fake pro-gun quotes that you might find on the internet that have gone viral in the past. And I'm also then going to give you a few real quotes from the Founding Fathers that you can use starting immediately if you want to support your Second Amendment rights. Plus, I'm going to show you 3 ways to possibly spot fishy quotes before you repost them or use them incorrectly. Hey folks, I'm Mark and welcome to the Four Boxes Diner. It's amazing how many fake quotations spread all over the internet about all sorts of things. That's why you have to make sure any pro-gun, pro-Second Amendment quote is real, is authentic, before you post it on social media or send it around. So what are some of the most popular fake quotes that I'm talking about that you need to be careful not to use? Let's start with our founding father, George Washington, our first president. This quote has been plastered all over the internet and on t-shirts, posters, and mugs. Here's the quote. Quote, "Firearms stand next in importance to the Constitution itself. Firearms are the American people's liberty teeth and keystone under independence." Close quote. Now that would be a great quote to throw at the anti-gun crowd from George Washington if it were real. But George Washington never wrote or said this. Or how about this quote? "When any nation mistrusts its citizens with guns, it is sending a clear message. It no longer trusts its citizens because such a government has evil plans." Close quote. Now you may also have seen that as a George Washington quote. You may have seen that on Facebook or some other aspect of social media. But again, that quote too is bogus. It's not real. And the same goes for a lot of other supposed Thomas Jefferson quotes. I mean, have you heard this one? Quote, "Free men do not ask permission to bear arms," close quote. Again, it's a great line, and I agree with it. Too bad that Thomas Jefferson never actually said that. Here's another line attributed to Jefferson. Quote, "The strongest reason for people to retain the right to keep and bear arms is as a last resort to protect themselves against tyranny and government," close quote. Survey says, sorry, Jefferson never said that. That's fake. Great quote. Just not Thomas Jefferson or anyone else, although it's a good line and probably accurate. But it wasn't Thomas Jefferson, so you can't say it was. Okay, you can find these fake gun quotes attributed to plenty of other founding fathers as well. So be very careful what you post on social media because we don't want you to get discredited if you make a mistake. Now you might be asking, Mark, come on, are you saying that we should not cite to or rely on the great founding fathers of this great country, the United States of America, in order to defend our Second Amendment rights? No, that is not what I'm saying. Quoting and relying on the founding fathers is actually a great way to support gun rights. In fact, the United States Supreme Court did exactly that in Heller in 2008. Remember, the Supreme Court itself loves to quote America's founding fathers. But the trick is, and this is the key, this is the key lesson, use real quotes that are actually from the founding fathers. Real history, not fake history. We don't need fake history. Our side doesn't have to make things up to show what the founding fathers thought about the importance of private civilian gun ownership. Remember, as you know from other videos, the first 8 presidents of the United States all carried guns. We do not have to make up history or exaggerate it to win the case, because history And the facts are on our side when it comes to the Second Amendment. So the good news is there are, in fact, a lot of great quotes from our founding fathers. And I'm going to give you 4 of my favorites that you can use starting right now. Let's start with Thomas Jefferson. Remember those fake Thomas Jefferson quotes I just gave you? Well, good news, Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence and one of our presidents, he made plenty of authentic pro-gun statements himself that are authentic and are true and correct. One of my favorites comes from a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to John Adams' son-in-law, another president, John Adams, his son-in-law, in 1787, 4 years before 1791, the year the Second Amendment was written and created. The quote goes from Thomas Jefferson. "What country can preserve its liberties if their rulers are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms," close quote. Now there's a good rallying cry if I ever saw one. Let them take arms. And in the year 1785, Thomas Jefferson also wrote the following advice in a letter to his nephew. Quote, "A strong body makes the mind strong. As to the species of exercise, I advise the gun. Let your gun, therefore, be the constant companion of your walks." Thomas Jefferson thought that as you walk, your gun should be your constant companion. Not my words, the words of Thomas Jefferson. And by the way, I'm going to put those quotes down below in the description so you can cut and paste them. That's what I'm going to do. Here's another quote from our founding fathers that I really like. It comes from James Madison, the father of the Constitution itself. In Federalist Papers number 46, and by the way, the Federalist Papers, if you recall, is a series of letters written by people like James Madison into the state of New York to be published in defense of the proposed Constitution to get, at the time, New Yorkers to vote in favor of adopting the new Constitution. That's what the Federalist Papers are all about. It's a compilation of these various letters written by people like James Madison about the Constitution they were advocating get adopted in the state of New York. That's what the Federalist Papers are. And in Federalist Papers number 46, James Madison himself wrote that, quote, "The advantage of being armed is one that Americans possess over the people of almost every nation," close quote. He added, Madison added, that in Europe, quote, "the governments are afraid to trust the people with arms," close quote. Again, I'm going to put these quotes down below. You can capture them. I'll even give you some citations you can rely on, so you don't have to trust me. You can actually check it out for yourself with some citations. Now, what would James Madison make of the anti-gun arguments today? I'm guessing he would not have been a fan. Now, the next quote that you can use comes from Thomas Paine, a great author, an important man during the American Revolution, whose famous pamphlet, Common Sense, helped inspire the revolution, the American Revolution itself. Thomas Paine understood a fundamental truth that anti-gunners do not, and that is when you deprive law-abiding citizens of firearms, you make them easy targets for violent criminals that want to engage in predation on ordinary Americans. Here's how Thomas Paine put it in his ornate 18th century language. Quote, "The supposed quietude of a good man allures the ruffian, while on the other hand arms, like laws, discourage and keep the invader and the plunderer in awe, and preserve order in the world and property. Since some will not, others dare not lay arms aside," close quote. Thomas Paine. And remember Thomas Paine's warning. You can lay aside your arms, but criminals and ruffians and other bad folks will not do so. A basic understanding of our founding fathers. And as you know from other videos on this channel, the founding fathers learned this lesson from, among others, Italian Enlightenment philosopher Cesare Beccaria, who wrote a critical book that all the founding fathers read about if you take arms away from the law-abiding, the only people that would be left with arms will be criminals, and they will basically engage in predation, targeting on the innocents. Sounds like if you make guns outlawed, only the outlaws will have guns today, but that's not a new concept. As you know from this channel, in a video I did on Cesare Beccaria, it's actually an 18th century concept. And my final quotation I want to give you to use, starting now if you want to on the internet, is from Samuel Adams. No, not from the beer company Samuel Adams, but the actual founder, one of our founding fathers who served in the Continental Congress and actually signed the Declaration of Independence. Now, you know what Sam Adams proposed during the Massachusetts Convention to ratify the Constitution? He said that the Constitution should, quote, be never construed to prevent the people of the United States who are peaceable citizens from keeping their own arms, close quote. Unfortunately, that's exactly how modern-day anti-gunners, as I see it, construe the Second Amendment today. They got it backwards. So it's up to us to set the historical and the factual record straight on the internet and beyond. And that's what it means to get the history right. And again, when it comes to the right to keep and bear arms, history, the facts, and the logic, as I see it, are all on our side and not the anti-gunner side. Look, I get it. You don't have time to research every quotation you see attributed to a founder on Twitter, Facebook, social media. I get it. But the good news is you don't need to. That's why we started this channel, The Four Boxes Diner, because here at The Four Boxes Diner, we try to do a deep dive on research on constitutional history so you don't have to. Okay, we try to make your life a little bit easier. Because I know you're all very busy with your jobs and your lives and just trying to live your lives. So we're trying to help you speed things along here. But again, let's say you want to make sure a quote is real that you've come across before you pass it on to other people in your emails or whatever. What are some of the ways that you can sort of confirm or make sure it's authentic? First, remember the good old adage, which goes like this. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is. Now, there's a lot of bogus quotes out there that go viral because in only a sentence or two, a founding father supposedly makes a perfect case in modern 21st century English for gun rights. And that's great. But again, it may not be authentic. So if you see something that's too good to be true, make sure you double check it. But again, you have to remember the founders were not masters of the soundbite. They weren't on cable news. There was no cable news when they were writing. So they had writings that were very dense and wordy by today's standards because remember, they all spoke multiple languages. They all wrote and spoke in Latin. They were well versed in the classics, very educated. It was not a soundbite world back then. They wrote longhand and cursive and all this sort of thing. So understand that the way they wrote in the 18th century, while still at the end of the day pretty clear, is relatively dense compared to modern 21st century writing here in the United States. Second, of course, you can always use a quick Google search to see what reveals an original source for the quotation. See if something pops up. I mean, one of the telltale signs that I look to for fake quotes on the internet is that if you can't find anything that tells you where or when the person supposedly made the statement, was it in a letter? Was it in a speech? Anything like that in some historical document, if you don't see anything like that, that's a sign that, the quote you're looking at may not be true. It may not be something you want to use because, again, you don't want to embarrass yourself or discredit yourself because it hurts everyone that supports the Second Amendment because, again, we don't need to use fake history as I see it to win. In my opinion, we can just use the authentic history like the Supreme Court does and prove the points that we want to make about our rights. And third, you can always go to a reliable source to see whether the quotes check out. For example, those fake George Washington quotes I read, well, the Mount Vernon website, that was Washington's home in Virginia, Mount Vernon, the Mount Vernon website debunks those. And the Monticello, which is the home of Thomas Jefferson, also in Virginia, the Monticello website does the same with bogus Thomas Jefferson quotes. And lastly, you can always read the Supreme Court's 2008 decision in Heller. It's very long. It's over 100 pages. I think there's about 60 pages of history in there. But you can read the Heller case and become familiar with the quotes of the Founding Fathers that Justice Scalia used in his opinion, because those check out because he went to put it in there because the Supreme Court, gets those things right because they have to. It's their job. You see, you don't want to be the person on the internet that everyone is screaming fake news at. Because if you say something that's demonstrably wrong, it's going to not only embarrass you, it's going to discredit you, and it's going to hurt the credibility of anyone that's advocating for the Second Amendment because they're going to equate you with the Second Amendment advocate and they're going to claim, hey, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, he has to make stuff up, and they're going to use that against everyone that supports the right to keep and bear arms under the Second Amendment and the entire Bill of Rights. So make sure you get it right if you're going to share information. After everything I said, you might be thinking, Mark, aren't you making too big of a deal out of this? I mean, what's the harm with a few social media posts, even if a couple things are wrong? Who cares? Here is the harm. once these fake quotes go viral, they don't necessarily stay on social media. They can jump and become more important somehow. They can start showing up in articles, books, and op-eds, and even legislation. Case in point. Believe it or not, in 2016, and I'll put an article down below about this, in 2016, some Washington state legislators introduced a pro-gun rights bill. Hey, that's great. I'm all for that. Unfortunately, the proposed bill included several of these kind of bogus quotations attributed to the founders. Talk about shooting yourself in the foot. Pardon the pun. Pardon the pun. I'm sorry I did that. Look, we're better than all of this, and we have plenty of real historical evidence we can use, so we don't need to use fabricated quotes. It's the anti-gun side, in my opinion, that often needs to make stuff up to prove their point, right? Recently, for example, a federal judge who seems to be a passionate anti-gunner, as best I can tell from what he writes, was caught spreading a false anti-gun quote. A federal judge. And this, again, wasn't on in social media. He actually included this fake quote in a huge decision that restricted millions of Americans' right to bear arms. In an opinion in the, I know what you guys are going to say already in the discussion, okay? In an opinion from the Ninth Circuit, that's right, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, Judge J. Bybee cited okay, this is fun, you're going to like this, cited a 1792 statute in North Carolina as evidence to uphold Hawaii's effective ban on openly carrying guns. But here's the thing, that 1792 law that was relied upon by the anti-gun judge to uphold gun control laws in Hawaii, that 1792 law did not exist. It never existed. It never passed the legislature. The judge should have known why. In fact, here's an example. The judge should have known the quote was fishy. And why is that? Let's think about this. The quote he used from 1792 mentions the word king in 1792. By 1792, not only had we won the American Revolution, we had enacted the Constitution, and we had a Second Amendment in 1791, a year before. So to pass a law in 1792 talking about the king in America after the enactment of the Constitution obviously is just stupid and absurd and should have been caught by a lifetime appointed federal judge. But it wasn't. Now, by the way, you can read a little bit about this story, this travesty of an opinion in my view, by historian and lawyer Stephen Halbrook. He did a great job in an article. I'll link to it down below if you want to get more information on the screw-ups in the Ninth Circuit opinion if you find that interesting. But the point being that this is an example of how even federal judges that can do sloppy work and misquote things that aren't real if they are not careful. And I don't want you, the viewers on this channel, to be sloppy and to make those kinds of mistakes, because you're representing the Second Amendment, right? Your client, in a sense, is not me, is not your fellow patriots, it's not your fellow Americans. To some degree, your client, the person you're supporting, the thing you're supporting, is the Second Amendment itself, the Constitution itself, and the Bill of Rights. Let me give you another example. In the recent oral argument for the Second Amendment case before the Supreme Court on Nyserpa versus Bruin, Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito called out the state of New York for allegedly distorting a North Carolina statute they had relied on in their brief. You see, what apparently happened, and Judge Alito pointed this out during our argument, I'll put the link to it down below, you can check it out yourself. Apparently New York, the lawyers or their legal brief had chopped off a crucial word from a quote that actually helped their anti-gun case before the Supreme Court. It fit their needs, it fit their argument. Now the full quote actually hurt the state of New York, who was arguing in favor of gun control. Now this apparent blatant misrepresentation, which even caught the eye of a Supreme Court justice, to me was huge, because you see New York only had 2 or 3 examples on their side dealing with the gun control legislation they were trying to support. Now I will link to the transcript of this argument below so you can check out what Samuel Alito said to the New York lawyer himself. It's quite interesting. And of course, you probably remember, and if you don't remember, you need to know this story. Okay, here's a story I probably should do a whole video on. It's the story of a historian named Michael Belial. Okay, he wrote a book, and you can Google this and get the details and all the historical facts on this. Belial wrote a book called Arming America, which claimed, his big assertion was, that no one at the founding era really owned guns, okay? That the gun culture, that everyone had guns and people used guns in the founding era was a myth. Those were his arguments. That was his point. And anti-gunners celebrated this research because they said, hey, this is going to prove the point that no one had guns. We should not protect the Second Amendment. It has nothing to do with guns. It has everything to do with the militia, okay? Now, Michael Belial was feted and worshipped at the time, and this is around 2000, 2001 or so. He actually won the most prestigious prize that anyone can win as a historian. It's called the Bancroft Prize, awarded, I believe, by a group of people at Columbia University, okay? Now, Belial's research, as it was lauded, okay? His research was initially lauded by the entire anti-Second Amendment community, right? They argued this was the scholarship that was going to take down the myth of the NRA and the myth that the Second Amendment protected an individual right. Problem, it turned out that Belial and his research was a fraud. It was such a fraud because he used apparently fake resources. And again, I'll put some articles down below. You can check it out, see if I'm telling the truth. But after he was called out, he apparently said that all of his research he had done was destroyed in a flood. But that turned out apparently not to be so true either. Bottom line is that Michael Belial, I think, illustrates a key point, that people that don't like guns in America, people that don't like our view of the Second Amendment, they have to, frankly, make up history. They have to rewrite history in some way. They have to reimagine history, but our side doesn't, because we have the historical record on our side. You see, this means that what I want you to do is to use actual quotes, actual historical resources that are credible. It's imperative that you use the right thing, the real thing, and not fake, because if you use something fake, it's going to discredit you and everyone in our community. So let's wrap up. If you care about gun rights in the Second Amendment, do not spread bogus quotations attributed to the founders. Unfortunately, you see many of these fake quotes over the years have gone viral, and they're not helpful to us, and they're not needed. We don't need to do this. But there's some easy steps, by the way, that you can take to check out any quotes you find on the internet to make sure they're authentic and real. And again, when you're talking to the anti-gunners or talking about the Second Amendment, you can always use the quotations that I've given you in this video and down below in the descriptions. Those quotations are real, they're authentic, and you can go ahead and start using them now. You don't need to use fake ones, you can use the real ones. They're really good too. Well, I hope you learned something here today at the Four Boxes Diner. Thanks again for joining us here at the Diner, where we serve fresh, hot Second Amendment news and analysis. And if you like what you heard and you learned something, we'd appreciate if you spread the word, because we're trying to grow the channel, and anything you can do to help, we would appreciate it. So until next time, we'll see you again at the Four Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.